Hello, hello! Welcome back to Brenda's Books. This season I will be narrating for you the future war love story, Sara's War, which you can also buy a printed copy and a digital copy at Barnes & Noble and on Amazon. Today we are on Chapter 33. Here we go. Chapter 33, Injured and Handcuffed. The captain leads me quite a ways, out of the trees, past the campfire, past the soldiers' tents, and into the meadow where Jack's tent is on the far side. The captain is silent through our entire walk together, although I do catch him eyeing me a few times like he wants to say something, but he never does. I'm sure he knows what transpired between Jack and me last night. I assume this is why he's not being more friendly. "Do you know what the injuries are?" I ask. "Not exactly," says the captain, "but I think one has a hurt knee." "Excuse me a moment." I stop in my tracks and kneel to open my first aid kit. "Good, I have one." "What do you have?" Chris wonders. "A splint," I reply, closing the kit and standing again, just in case. Chris nods as we continue our walk. We pass Jack's tent completely and plow through some more oaks, then out to the dirt road. All of our buses and trucks are lined up on the grass, just off the road. As we tread through the weeds, I spot 3 men in uniform on the open grass, close to one of the buses. One tan-skinned soldier stands straight and tall. Another soldier, who looks quite a bit younger than me, sits on a large rock with his hands behind his back. Handcuffed, I assume. The third is lying down on his side, with his back to me, his hands cuffed behind his back as well. As we approach the group, the soldier standing reaches out his hand to me. "Hello, ma'am. I'm Specialist Stein." I shake his hand. "Nice to meet you. I'm Dr. Andrews." "Ooh," exclaims the soldier on the rock, looking me over. "You're the doctor. I must admit I am not disappointed," he sneers. I glare at him as hard as I can. "Not one of these guys again." "Shut your mouth," Chris says sternly, although with his voice it's hard to sound stern. Then out strolls Jack from behind the closest bus. It's all I can do not to gape. He's just wearing an Army combat camo uniform, and yet he looks so striking. At this moment I decide it's because of how he carries himself, with confidence and assertion. Jack, with his passive mask on, stares at the soldier on the rock. When they lock eyes, the soldier grimaces and visibly shrinks back. It's obvious he's uncomfortable with Jack's presence. "Dr. Andrews," Jack says to me very formally, "this imbecile," he gestures toward the man on the rock, "might have a broken wrist. And this imbecile," he gestures toward the man lying on the ground, "definitely has a dislocated kneecap." I glance at the man on the ground. He's cringing and sweating and panting. "Okay, let's start with this one," I suggest, pointing to him. "But I'll need him flat on the ground." Chris unlocks the soldier's handcuffs, allowing him to fall on his back with his arms to his sides. "You try anything, Watson, and I will break your neck," Jack threatens in a dark tone. The intensity of his warning sends chills down my spine. It's different hearing Jack talk like this. He sounds ruthless, mean. No one speaks. I'm keenly aware that all eyes are on me, waiting for me to do something. "It would be helpful if I had an assistant," I announce, as I kneel at the foot of the injured man. "Is it something I can do?" asks Chris. "Yes, thank you. Kneel at his head, and when I tell you to, hold his arms in his armpits, and make sure he doesn't move," I command. "Not even a little bit." "All right," Chris says, as he kneels over the squirming soldier. "If you can relax, Private, this won't hurt as much," I say loudly. But rather than relaxing, he tenses up. "Watson," I chide, "breathe deeply. This will be over soon." I find it to be helpful to the wounded when I use his or her name. I'm not sure why this is, but it usually works. Watson trembles, but makes a conscious effort to breathe in and out. "That's better," I encourage him. His injured leg is bent and flopped to one side. I massage his thigh to release the tension. "He doesn't deserve to be treated gently," complains the standing specialist. "I'm a doctor, specialist, not a disciplinarian." I continue massaging. "Are you ready, Captain?" I ask. Chris nods and grips Watson's arms and holds them exactly how I told him to. Gingerly, I move the soldier's leg so it's lined up directly with his body. Watson writhes in pain, but the captain holds him firmly in place. I straighten Watson's leg in a direct line, tightly bracing his kneecap, to which I feel a wrenching snap under my palm. Then slowly, I bring his leg to the ground. A small snap now. Watson stops writhing and breathes heavily. "Feel better?" I ask. The private nods against the grass. "Good," I say, as I open my first aid kit and pull out an ace bandage and quickly wrap it neatly around his knee. "You'll need to take it easy for a while, okay?" Watson nods again, staring at the sky. "Wow, doctor," cries the private first class, who is still sitting on the rock. I glance up at him. "You!" But he stops short as Jack grabs him by his shirt collar and jerks him forward. "You're not going to say a word, are you?" Jack warns in the same dark tone as before. The soldier's mouth hardens and he shakes his head. Jack lets go of him with a little force, then stands in front of him, facing away from me. He bends low, getting nose to nose with the soldier. He whispers something fierce, but I can't make out the words. Suddenly, Jack shouts, "What will it be?" This startles me so much I literally jump in place. "I won't, sir," the soldier answers, with obvious bitterness in his tone. Jack stands straight now and walks around behind him. "You may look at his wrist now, doctor," Jack says calmly as he unlocks the soldier's handcuffs. First aid kit in hand, I stand and take a few steps over to the dreaded patient. Jack walks around the rock again and stands next to me as I examine the soldier's wrist. It's difficult to ignore the thick tension between the two men, but I do my best. Fortunately, the wrist is only sprained, and so I bandage it up quickly. The entire time, the soldier glares viciously at Jack, who in turn looks completely passive and hardly seems to notice. When I finish, Jack promptly handcuffs the soldier again and orders Chris and the specialist to get these criminals gone for good. Chris pulls Watson to his feet, handcuffs him immediately, and leads the stumbling man to the bus, while the specialist grabs the private first class by the elbow and drags him along behind him. Jack and I watch them in silence as they enter the bus. Through the windows I see both criminals get pushed down into separate seats. Jack stares at them thoughtfully for a moment longer, then turns to me. It's the first time this morning he's looked at me directly. "There are some more injured people who are probably at your medical setup by now," Jack informs me. "I'll come with you." "Thank you, sir, but I'm sure I can make it there on my own," I decline. "Not a chance," Jack says in a hard tone. "Oh, please, no," I say in my head. "No, no, no." Grudgingly, I submit, but I try not to show it on my face. This is going to be so awkward. And indeed, it is awkward. We trudge along through the weeds and through the woods side by side in utter silence. Ugh, how I wish I could teleport right now. When we step out of the meadow and into the woods again, I cannot take this discomfited quiet any longer. So I say the first thing that comes to mind. "Were those two really criminals?" I question, shifting my glance toward him. "Absolutely," Jack says, still looking straight ahead. "What did they—" "You don't want to know," Jack interrupts. Actually, I do want to know, but I decide it's not my place, so I don't push the subject. "How did they get hurt?" I wonder. "I did that," Jack says flatly. "Okay," I say slowly, completely shocked. "I assume you're wondering why," says Jack, still not looking at me. "Naturally, sir, but it's probably not my place to know." I'm surprised when Jack ignores my comment and gives me an explanation. "Early this morning I got a text saying SOS at 1:45. Well, when I got there, I didn't see anything at first, but then I heard some yelling on what I thought was one of the buses. I walked around to get on the bus, And that's when I saw those 2 privates maliciously beating up a first year. They knew they were suspected of worse crimes, so when they saw me they were afraid. That's probably not the only reason, I say in my head. Watson bolted across the road, but I caught him before he could get too far, Jack continues. While Watson was struggling to get out of my grasp, I saw Sims, the private first class, continue to beat that first year to death. I couldn't help him and keep Watson in one spot. I could have called someone, but I didn't want the first year to get beaten up for another 5 minutes, or however long it would take for help to come. That's when I decided to take Watson's knee out so he couldn't run anymore. Then I was able to stop Sims. I bite my lip. I have no idea what to say to this. Nice work? It doesn't seem right. But in reality, I guess he had done the best thing. I wonder who sent him the text, but Jack probably left that part out on purpose. When I did reach Sims, Jack continues again, I sprained his wrist simply by blocking his own punches. I didn't try to do that. We walk past the large oak that leads into the medical spot. But before we can go any farther, Jack abruptly stops in his tracks and turns to face me. There might be more criminals in this camp, which is why I didn't risk you walking by yourself. I'm aware you're capable of it on your own. I'm not a chauvinist, he says with a slight indignance. The thought of you being such never crossed my mind, Colonel, I appease. Jack looks at me with a very controlled and composed expression. Besides, he says, there's a situation here that also needs to be taken care of. I want to ask if it involves my nurses, but I'm distracted by Randy's deliberate steps toward us. Excuse me, Colonel, Randy says. May I speak with the doctor? Jack nods and takes a step to the side, but not enough to be out of hearing range. Doctor, Randy says to me, there's 2 patients. Nurse Jones and I have taken care of one. The only thing we could really do for him was bandage up his cuts and give him some ice. But the other patient, you might want to see yourself. I would like to speak with him also, says Jack. Yes, sir, says Randy, a little surprised. But before I do, I would like to tell you something, Jack says to Randy. Randy stammers, yes, of course, sir. Randy glances at me for any clues, to which I give him a little shrug. Jack steps casually toward him. I want to commend you on your bravery yesterday, and quick thinking. Well done. Randy looks completely baffled. Just doing my duty, sir. It was a nice soldier move, Jack says. Thank you, sir, says Randy. Even though Jack is complimenting him freely, Randy looks like all he wants to do is escape the conversation. Well, I better get to my patient, I announce. Nurse Reynolds, will you go around and get a list of people who have an O-negative blood type? Yes, I'll get right to it, Randy says readily. Thank you, I appreciate it, I tell him. Without another moment's delay, Randy plows through the woods. I spot my new patient lying flat on a gurney a few feet behind Kate, who is cleaning up some bloody rags and disposing Band-Aid wrappers in a small black trash bag. She must have already sent away the poor beaten-up first-year private, because he is no longer in sight. I quicken my steps toward her, my feet squishing in the moist dirt along the way. Nurse Jones, how is Sergeant Stowe doing? I ask before I reach her. She looks up from her bag. Still dead asleep, she says. I guess someone should be able to get sleep around here, right? She smiles at me, then continues filling her bag. Why don't you go get some sleep of your own? I tell her. I know you were up a lot last night. Sounds good to me, she replies. I will as soon as I finish cleaning this up. Thank you, I tell her. I walk toward the man on the gurney. When I'm close enough to see the man's face, I gasp aloud at the sight of him, slapping one hand over my mouth. Every inch of him is covered with blood and bruises. It's Nate. And that concludes Chapter 33. I hope you come back next Thursday for Chapter 34, which is called Confronting a Coward. I wonder who the coward could be. And remember to tell your mother Happy Mother's Day, or your mother figure, tell her Happy Mother's Day. If you want to find out more about Brenda's books, you can visit brendasbooks.net. Until next time, take care.